FoilGP, Mauser's report. Today I'm going to talk about how to tune your foil and as far as changing the length of your fuse, the tail position, the tail angle, the tail shape, and show you how that gives you pretty much an infinite number of setups. Let me first introduce you my latest love. It's an AFS alien full system Silk 650. I also have the 850, and I'm gonna briefly talk about this foil. Why don't I move the camera so I don't let people lean over instead? You can also see the lady in the background. Her name is Alexandra. Someone named it like that. Anyway, front foil and fuse are monoblocked one piece. You can't even change the last third of the fuse like some brands we're going to get there allow you to do. Why did I do that? There's a reason, of course. It's not the easiest for traveling, so there's got to be a good reason, and the good reason is the stiffness of the whole setup. Here it says UHM, stands for ultra high modulus. It's the stiffest, most expensive, and also most brittle, so you got to be careful, carbon available out there for these applications. And so the whole thing is incredibly stiff. There's no connections anywhere other than the tail that is screwed on. Their Pure 560, for example, is a monoblock full thing. F1 Escape is a monoblock full thing. Those things are wonderful from the stiffness of the setup, but then there's no tuning allowed there other than maybe changing the mass position, but that's not what we're talking about today. So, good and bad, as usual. Always a trade-off, always a compromise. In this particular case, they decided to give the user two positions for the tail. The 850 is only one. I do like the idea. As a matter of fact, I use both positions. I have 3 different AFS tails, and so I'm going to count how many position or setups that is if I add the use of a piece of plastic. This is a piece of an Armstrong foil, but any thin piece of plastic would work. Let me start by this position compared to this position. If I move it from here to here, I'm making the fuse longer. That stabilizes the pitch, but it also reduces the maneuverability. Stable is the same thing as non-maneuverable in my head, or that's pretty much a language thing. So it's understandable why that happens. You have the guy in the steering canoe of episode 1 sticking his paddle more back, and overall the whole thing is more stable. When do I want to do that? I have small, clean waves. I can enjoy a short fuse. Bigger, bumpier waves, I put it in the back, because at that point I really want to have a better pitch control. But the pitch control is one of those things that is so personal. It depends on your sensitivity. I used to ride Armstrong 50 fuse, the 525 HA at the front, and do wind-down winders. At the beginning it was completely impossible, and after a few months that was my go-to foil, and so that means that my pitch sensitivity increased. So it depends on the rider. There's no general rule. What's better for you is not what's better for another person. I talk about, so those are the two differences. I'm going to repeat. If I move it back, I'm going to have more stabilization. Not much changes as far as speed. Also because in this case I have this piece here in the water no matter what. Otherwise, if I add a little bit piece of something, I think it goes a little slower. Let's see what happens if I instead use this. Because I could achieve a higher degree of stabilization also if I choose to put this shim under the front screw. Why is that? Because the tail, as I said in episode 1, has an angle of incidence towards the bottom of the ocean. By increasing the angle of incidence, I increase the overall lift and the overall stability at expense of speed. I'm going to go slower. If I put the same piece of plastic under the back screw, so between the tail and the fuse, I'm going to reduce the angle of incidence and have the opposite effect. More speed, but less stability. This is called a negative angle. The first one was called a positive angle, because in the end, what you're changing is the relative angle between the tail and the front. Here there's a certain amount of degrees, I have no idea. Here too, I don't care about how much it is. All I care is that I have the option to change that and change the feeling of the foil. So I already, even in just one position, I have 3 setups, thanks to the little piece of plastic. And if I had 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of plastic, that's why it's so infinite. I can change all the angles I want. Then I have a slightly bigger tail, and then I have a completely different, more high aspect tail. And already there, let me count again, 3 in this position, thanks to this. 3 in this position, it's 6 different setups with one tail. I got 3 tails, 18 different feels I can get out of a foil if I only have 2 extra tails and a piece of plastic. How incredibly awesome is that? It's like 18 different foils without buying 18 different foils. So not only that, is that you go in the water, a very good practice in my opinion is to, before you do a change like this, try to guess what's going to happen, and I'm giving you plenty guidelines from this point of view, but then still go to the water and verify if what you guessed is correct, maybe to a certain point, then you find a different side effect that you didn't think about. It's a really, really, really fun game. So this was what you can change, how you can tune on a foil like this. I brought up some F1 tails also. F1 is a different system instead, in which the rest of the foil is here, I don't have it here, and so you can connect this to the front of the fuse and the foil, which are monoblock. I love monoblock stuff. I love the ability of tuning, and those two things are contrasting, so it's a bit of a contradiction, but plenty of contradictions in my life anyway. Oh my god. So this guy and this guy, imagine this. You see there are 2 different lengths, and they have at least 4 or 5 different lengths. There are other brands that offer you the possibility of changing the length of the fuse. Armstrong got 3 of them, Axis got 100. I love the ability of the more option, the better, in my opinion. That's how you change the length of the fuse with this system. F1, you notice that in this case you also have still the screws that you can change the angle of attack of the tail. F1 also makes, oh my god, so much lighter, I love it, monoblock tails, in which you cannot change the angle of attack. You can change the length of the fuse. They are coming up these days with longer fuse for the same monoblock tail size and shape, and so good and bad for everything. But look how streamlined this thing is compared to this guy. You see, this piece is there pretty much only to allow the inserts of the screws of the tail. Without screws, look how much more hydrodynamic the whole thing is. One thing I want to add is that any one of these slightly different setups that you can achieve by doing these things might, remember the might, require you to change the mast position. Because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's so little that it's good anyway without changing. But a classic example, if I have this setup and I add a shim, either the front or the tail, that is a classic case in which most likely you want to change the position. When you increase the angle of incidence, you increase the lift, so you want to move it back. And that brings into the equation a whole bunch of other things. By having the mast more to the back, the whole feel of the surfing foiling changes. You got more drive because you move the mast to the back, you have more board in the front, and that helps also the stabilization effect. It is stuff that you gotta go in the water and try. And I hope that I told you enough. The message has arrived, and I hope you're gonna enjoy the tuning game as much as I do. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.